All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise of Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the host and the founder of the Rise of Justice Movement and the Rise of Justice Movement, the podcast. All right. So, another addition to our candidate series that we are doing, where we are interviewing candidates that are running at all levels of government because every single election matters. Today, I am joined by Jakeya Johnson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm excited to have you because you have quite the platform.
Thank
And
you.
you came highly recommended. And for anybody who is listening, all of the candidates that we are interviewing have either been recommended by us or, oops, recommended to us. Let me rephrase that. I've done this too many times now. I should have it more put together. But let's jump in and talk about, why are you running and what has led you to running for Congress? What's your story? I know this is a loaded question,
That's a big
but
question, yeah. But
feel free to kind of like jump in and feel free to ramble as much as you would like to. This episode is for you.
I love this question. It's a big one, but I love talking about it because it's important. I'll start from the very beginning. So I started my career in healthcare administration. I done that because I watched my mom work through the healthcare system for so long. She was terminally ill when I was growing up, and she died when I was 12. And we spent so much time in and out of hospitals and doctor's appointments that I just really admired healthcare professionals. And I knew that direct patient care wasn't for me. And so I decided to go into healthcare administration. And I was really excited to get the opportunity to help families in the way that I felt like my family had been helped. And I learned very quickly that healthcare administration is not where you go if you want to help people. I was managing office that did therapy for children. We did speech and behavioral and play therapy. And I spent so much of my days having to tell parents that even though their doctors told them that the kids needed these services, their insurance companies had said no. And so we couldn't help them unless they could pay out of pocket. And this is like thousands of dollars a week. And I mean, there's so many families that I feel like we had to let down because their insurance companies didn't want to cover the services that they need. And eventually I just made the decision to leave my job. I had gone back and forth on it for a long time about whether I wanted to keep doing this job just to earn a paycheck or if I wanted to honor my values. And ultimately my values won. And so I left my job and I had no idea what I was going to do um, because I just spent this ridiculous amount of money in 4 years earning this degree to do exactly that. And so I started doing a lot of volunteer work and I really fell in love with public service. I was doing reproductive justice work. I was doing liberation work, and it was something that I really, really loved. And I got an opportunity to work in the Maryland General Assembly. I served as the chief of staff for one of our state elected officials, and it really sparked an interest in public policy for me. And so I was able to connect the dots between this really important community work that I was doing and policy work. And I said, I want to do something that puts those two things together. And so I decided to go back to school and I did my master's in public administration and policy. And that was my first real exposure to um, writing policy myself. I had a project, my very first class in my master's program, where we were supposed to um, identify a real public issue and propose a policy solution for it. And, at that point, I was really staunch reproductive justice advocate. And so the issue that I identified was just access to reproductive health care on college campuses. And the solution that I proposed was just something simple, vending machines that give students access to condoms and, birth control, emergency contraception, period products, just basic things that you can buy over the counter. And my project was over, and I thought, well, this idea seems like something that we probably can make happen in real life. And so I put a plan together and I took it to the health center at my university. And the director of the health center, she goes, well, I think this is a great idea, but I'm not going to put my time and resources into it. So if you can make it happen, I think you should. And if you've ever said those words to an Aries before, you probably know that, I said, okay, I can make this happen by myself. I don't need you. And so it took probably about a year of doing research and talking to students at universities across the state and, pulling numbers. And I learned that this was not just an issue on my campus, this was an issue everywhere. And so I wrote my first piece of policy and I took it to one of our state legislators thinking that, I'd never hear anything from her, but she took me up on it and we worked together to pass legislation that requires all public colleges in the state of Maryland to have 24-hour access to emergency contraception and over-the-counter birth control and period products, and to also offer to students education that is based in science, which I think is so important, especially right now where we're seeing attacks on, science-based or fact-based education. And so, we fought for science-based reproductive healthcare education. We fought for um, either on-campus access or a robust referral network for abortion care. And, I got the opportunity to work with her on similar policy the next year, affecting our community colleges. And then I had the opportunity to actually work in community with these colleges and with students to implement these changes on their campuses. And I think that experience really showed me how powerful having connections to your community can be when you're working in public policy. And that's a long roundabout way of saying that I saw what was missing in representation in our community here. Um, and I thought we deserve better. I think I live in Maryland's fourth congressional district. We're the second most Democratic district in the entire country. And we have a very moderate corporate aligned representative who very often ignores the will of the people here. And no one was going to challenge him because he's aligned with the political establishment. He has a name that is well known. And so I thought, well, I think we can do better than that. And if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Absolutely. And you bring up my next question. But first of all, thank you for sharing that and also sharing about your mother and, kind of, it's so essentially your platform comes from the human first approach, right? And it comes from like lived experience and like personal experience. Like you said, you saw like gaslighting, right? And you saw
Yeah.
like these injustices that within our healthcare system, but also like the reproductive space and et cetera. So again, thank you for sharing that. So it comes down to money and politics. 2010, the FEC or the Citizens United versus FEC, thinking about Citizens United, thinking about the influence of money and politics. You have APAC, you have J Street, you have a lot of these other like foreign entities. You also have a lot of this dark money. You have a lot of just money in general influence. The NRA influences. There's a lot that goes into it. So, what are your thoughts about ending Citizens United, but also how do we get the money out of politics? Because obviously, ending Citizens United and overturning it obviously is the big part of it, but it also goes a lot further than that as well. There's more work to do outside of that than just that.
Yeah, I think Citizens United was such an awful thing for our democracy. Um, in the same way that we've seen the influx of money come in from corporations and these super PACs, we've seen the amount of representation given to everyday American people decline. They're almost exactly on the same line. Um, Money has so much influence in our politics, and I find it really difficult to believe that that is a controversial stance. I think it is only controversial to the people who are benefiting from that system. And overturning Citizens United would be monumental, I think. Um, so much of the things that we see happening right now are happening because that's what the corporations want. That's what the billionaires want. That's what the people who have all the money to give want. A lot of people don't know that if, you or I wanted to make a contribution to a political campaign, I think federally, the maximum that we could donate is $3,500. Yet if you were, some corporation super PAC or some billionaire with a super PAC, you could give as much money as you wanted, and there's no limit at all. And so when we see that happening, what that means is that our politicians aren't working for us anymore. They're working for the people who have the money. They're working for the people who are bankrolling their campaigns. And all of us just kind of get left out to dry. We have to fend for ourselves. That's not what government should be. Our government, the main function of government should be to make people's lives better. And we haven't seen that, at least not in my lifetime. I don't think we've ever truly seen a representative democracy. But I think after what we've seen, especially over the last year and a half, we have a real opportunity to change that.
And to prevent it from getting much, 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 much worse, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we the people have the power, right? Congress has the power of the purse, even though they act like they do not. But we do have three branches of government. At least that's what I was taught in government, in my government classes in high school. So I believe that, right? And I also believe in the right to due process. And thinking about due process, what are you seeing in your district in regards to DHS and these masked ICE agents running rampant in our communities?
Yeah, we have a very large immigrant population here in the fourth district, and unfortunately, we've seen those communities heavily affected by ICE. I spent a lot of time with an organization called Route One Mutual Aid, and they deliver groceries to families who have been impacted by ICE. Many of them are moms with young children who, their husbands were taken away. They were kidnapped by ICE, and um, that's their family's primary breadwinner. That's these children's father, these women's husbands, and it's gotten to a point where they're terrified to even leave home. And so we've been delivering groceries on a biweekly basis, and we started doing that back in, oh, I think it was November of last year. Just a small handful of families. We're serving over 100 families a week at this point. Um, it's been a huge, huge impact, and it really breaks my heart that we have a representative here in this district who will say ICE doesn't have a place in this community, but he won't say that ICE has no place in any community. I think there's absolutely no benefit to having ICE at this point. They are lawless, untrained. Uh, there's no amount of training or guardrails that you can put on a rogue agency like that. We need to abolish ICE, and uh, that feels like a baseline. I think we also need to really be thinking about how we can build humane pathways to citizenship that honor due process, that honor keeping families together, and that don't include detention.
Because families belong together. And that
Exactly.
is what makes America great, right? And that's what, truly the protecting our communities and understanding the injustices that our communities are facing, and also thinking about the federal minimum wage has not been increased since 2009, right?
Yeah.
It keeps families in poverty, and the cost of living continues to increase. The cost of groceries, the cost of gasoline, the cost of like literally everything, and the rent is too damn high, especially for disabled community members. Which brings me into the next thing that I would love to talk with you about is disability rights and disability justice. So we know about the Americans for Disabilities, the ADA, and it still needs some work around that. But on your platform, you talk about disability justice. And I love this because oftentimes people with disabilities are left out of the conversation. The accessibility is not accessible. And thinking about disability justice, what does it look like to you? And what do you propose as far as like expanding the ADA, or, what does it mean to you whenever we think about disability justice?
Yeah, I think there are lots of things that we can do to better serve our disabled communities. I think a lot of people don't realize that. disability community is one that we all have a pretty good chance of belonging to at some point in time. And it feels like something that's kind of been an afterthought in government. Um, for example, simple things like when we think about infrastructure, when we think about public transit, disability inclusion has kind of been an afterthought of something that we think about after the fact. We should be building those things into all of the processes that we come up with. I think the way that we treat disabled people in this country when it comes to benefits is absolutely awful. I mean, they're not allowed to have savings. They're not allowed to, in some cases, if you get married, you lose your benefits. Um, if you earn too much money or you save too much money, it just basically what we're saying is if you have a disability, you have to live at the margins, and that's all we'll allow you to do. And I think that's such a disgusting thing. So many people are just kind of forced to live in poverty just to qualify for these disability benefits or supplemental security income. People shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to choose between, actually living and enjoying life and some sense of stability. I think healthcare has to be accessible. I know so many people who even despite the benefits that they're able to get, spend so much on healthcare. Uh, and there's the easy fix to that would serve not just our disability communities, but everyone. If we had a universal healthcare system that took care of people's needs, that provided preventative healthcare and healthcare when we need it, that took care of things like durable medical equipment, um, being able to fully enforce the Americans with Disabilities Act, investing in things like housing that's accessible, transportation that's accessible, creating digital spaces so that people who live with disabilities can fully engage in life. I mean, I could just ramble on and on. There's so much.
I welcome the rambling, and I think it's incredible because it all ties in together and it's all connected, right? Injustice affects all of us, right? Some more than others.
Yeah.
And thinking about that and thinking about the ease of accessibility, so healthcare. And I want to jump in and talk about Black maternal health here in just a moment, but I also want to recognize the Black Maternal Health Caucus within Congress, which is led by Congresswoman Alma Adams and then also Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. And there's something that I specifically want to highlight in this, and it's the Momnibus Act. So the Momnibus Act was introduced by Representative Lauren Underwood, who's a Democrat out of Illinois, and Representative Alma Adams, Democrat out of North Carolina, and then Senator Cory Booker. I have my own recollection of that one, but I'm going to keep my personal opinion out of this because let's talk about Black maternal health. The United States, and this is directly off the Black Maternal Health Caucus, which is on Congresswoman Underwood's website as well. The United States has the highest maternal mortality rate of any high income country and significant disparities in outcomes. And since the pandemic, this crisis is getting worse, but there's hope. The data shows that 80% of America's maternal deaths can be prevented, and that's what the Momnibus Act is designed to do. The Momnibus Act is designed to end preventable or to end preventable. I've been talking too much. Maternal death in America by ending maternal health disparities, growing and diversifying the perinatal health workforce, expanding access to maternal health, or expanding access to maternal mental health and substance use care, lowering healthcare costs, investing in technological solutions, closing research gaps, improving data collection, and providing direct federal funding for local community-based organizations that improve maternal health outcomes. Since 2023, the caucus has enacted over 200 million in Momnibus funding through the federal appropriations process. So I love this, first of all, because it's something that obviously needs to continue being talked about. And let me know. We're going to do like a rapid fire thing. Are you ready? So you'll
Okay.
say yay or nay. Okay.
Okay. Let's
So
go.
there's 14 individual bills within the Momnibus. So make critical investments in social determinants of health that influence maternal health outcomes like housing, transportation, and nutrition.
Yes, absolutely.
Extend WIC eligibility in the postpartum and breastfeeding periods.
Yes,
Provide funding to community based organizations that are working to improve maternal health outcomes and promote equity.
absolutely.
Increase funding for programs to improve maternal health care for veterans.
Yes.
Grow and diversify the perinatal workforce. I think I said that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but perinatal workforce to ensure that every mom in America receives maternal health care and support from people they trust.
Yes, I love that.
Improve data collection processes and quality measures to better understand the causes of the maternal health crisis in the United States and inform solutions to address it.
Yes.
Fantastic. That's just seven, but there's 14 altogether. But
Mhm.
we'll kind of leave it at that point, and I'll come back to this
Yeah.
here in just a little bit.
I mean, I
Um,
can't tell you how much I love that because a lot of the times we get policy that feels like somebody in an ivory tower wrote something down that they thought would help people. This is policy that feels like it was co-created with the people who have
mhm.
experienced these problems. I can't tell you how much I love it.
And that's exactly why I wanted to highlight this specifically because let's dive in and talk about reproductive rights, Black maternal health. I can't help but think about Adriana Smith in Georgia, and I've talked about her a couple times on this podcast, but I think about that. You know, she was declared brain dead and was forced to stay on life support against the will of obviously, caregivers, etc. And even like some of the hospital staff also objected, but due to the extreme abortion ban in the state of Georgia, she was forced to give birth to her child via a forced C-section. Um, Thinking about that, that's just one instance of like hundreds of thousands of women and working people that have experienced this. And just thinking about that, let's dive in and talk about Black maternal health. And what what do you think people should know about injustices that women face in this
Um,
arena specifically?
yeah, I think the biggest thing that people should know is that it is not accidental, it is systemic. And the one silver lining to such systemic issues is that they're fixable. You know, it's not something that just happens by chance. It's something that we know why it happens and we can fix it. Um, the whole story of Adriana Smith, it still makes my stomach turn to this day. I can't imagine how her family felt. I can't imagine um, being put in that situation. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think the baby that they made her body carry for months is even still suffering now. There's no winner in this situation. It was a really awful thing. But I think when we think about Black maternal health, there are so many really simple things that we can do. Research has shown us that Black women have better maternal health outcomes when they are seen by Black nurses and Black doctors. Um, that's such a simple investment that we could be making to make sure more people, there are lots of people who are interested in this kind of thing, who want to go to school and learn gynecology and want to be able to support moms and parenting people through pregnancies. And finances are an issue. It could be making grants and scholarships toward making sure that we have more Black and brown people in these fields to take care of moms of color. I think another really simple thing we could do is making sure that there are support systems out there. I don't know about some other places in the country, but here in Maryland, where we're one of the more progressive states when it comes to reproductive health rights and justice, and it is still incredibly difficult to get a birthing center in Maryland because there are so many unnecessary rules and restrictions and hurdles that you have to jump through. Yet women who have access to birthing centers have better outcomes. Um, there are places in the state of Maryland where there's a single OBGYN treating an entire county. That is not sustainable. There is no way that that one person can be giving everybody the highest level of care. Um, there are so many things that we could be doing to better support moms. For example, on the postpartum side, I think I have the 7-year-old. When she was born, I got one appointment at 6 weeks, and then after that, everything was about her. And great, we should be taking care of the baby, so we have to take care of moms too. Nobody's really checking on their mental health. Nobody's checking on their physical health. There are so many scary things that can happen post-birth. And if you don't know what to look for, if you don't know what can happen, it's very easy to miss. And that can be a life-threatening miss. So just making sure that they have access to that care. You mentioned WIC, which fantastic program. I think that we put far too many limits on WIC, not just time limits, but what women and pregnant people or parenting people can use WIC for. Um, it almost feels like we don't want to help people, and then we act surprised when the fertility rate is steadily dropping, or people are choosing not to have children.
Whenever we think of the state of the world right now, so we have armed conflict that continues going on, like in our streets. We have mass ICE agents continuing to run, and oh God, the right to due process is being neglected, right? And it's not even being focused on. Thinking about the healthcare system, thinking about money in politics, thinking about, gun violence is something that is under talked about and oftentimes overlooked, right? And
Mhm.
unless it's in your local communities, but the NRA pours millions and millions and millions of dollars into the pockets of aligned politicians, not only in Congress, presidential, etc., but also like locally too. And there's a lot of work that can be done like locally to support gun violence prevention. My grandfather was a gun owner. He was also an Air Force veteran, and he believed in the right to bear arms. He also believed in common sense, right? And he always kept the firearms locked up from his children and from the grandchildren and etc. Um, if he knew the devastating impact. Now, thinking about gun violence and gun violence prevention, do you support like background checks on all like ammo sales, gun purchases? What do you propose as far as like gun violence prevention, and what are steps that we can take as a society to recognize the ongoing gun violence epidemic, and how do we address it? Again, this is another loaded question. I tend to do this a bit, but this is the point in the podcast where people are getting settled in. They're feeling the vibe of the podcast. Now they're ready for the long-term conversation, right? They're ready for the rambling and the ranting because obviously
Yeah.
what is working right now is not working. Think about Sandy Hook. Think about Columbine. Think about, Pulse nightclub shooting. Think about, Uvalde. Think about all the school shootings. Think about, nightclubs. Think about, and there's so many, and it's incredibly hard to even recognize. But also thinking about police violence. Thinking about, Dante Wright in, I believe, Minnesota. Thinking about Alex Preddy, right?
Yeah.
So just thinking about all of this, what's your thoughts on the state of gun violence?
I think it is something that we should be treating like an epidemic. Um, that's a scary thing, and this is, I think, even scarier is that we've gotten to a point where we kind of normalize it. I could see on TikTok, videos from children who are actually in schools as a shooting is happening, and it just that's not something we should see just scrolling through a feed. That's not a normal thing. There's no place in this world where something like that just happens the way that it does here. And like you said, the NRA plays a really big role in that. Um, but I think that we should be prioritizing it in the same way that we would prioritize any real serious healthcare issue. I think um, guns are now the leading cause of death for children, which is scary, really scary, because it's something that would be so easy to prevent. You asked if I supported background checks before purchasing a weapon, and I absolutely do. I think universal background checks should be the floor in a situation like this. I mean, I would have to jump through more hoops to sell food out of my kitchen than I would to go and buy a gun. Uh, that just blows my mind. Uh, we should be able to um, stop people from buying weapons when they have backgrounds that raise red flags. We should be able to rely on families to say, "Hey, I think my loved one poses a threat to themselves, or I think they may possibly pose a threat to someone else, and they shouldn't have access to a weapon." And that's something that we should take seriously. I can't imagine any reason why any person who is not out fighting a war should have access to an assault weapon. There's no reason why assault weapons should be on our streets and our neighborhoods. And I think a ban on assault weapons or high capacity weapons should be kind of a baseline for us too. Um, you mentioned your grandfather being a gun owner. Yeah, my dad and my grandfather are both proud gun owners, but they've always prioritized safety over everything else. I didn't even know that my dad had a gun at home until I was an adult and moved out because he was incredibly safe with it. He kept it locked away. He kept it in a place where we would never even think to look. And I think that when we have cases where that's not happening, then the gun owner should be held accountable. There should be consequences for that type of thing because people are losing their lives. And it's not like some abstract thing. We've seen that it works. There are states that have stronger laws around background checks, and they see, fewer domestic violence issues, fewer school shootings and mass shootings. They see fewer, suicides by gun. So it works. We just need to be willing to implement it. We need to be willing to care more about people's lives than we do about the money that the NRA is willing to give to these politicians.
Absolutely, 100%. And that kind of brings up like the next aspect, community-based justice and community policing. What does this look like to you? It's a part of your platform. I would love for you to expand on this, but what does community-based justice look like? And thinking about this, this is like a form of like restorative justice and like transformational justice. And thinking about this because it's community based and it's community based needs. I think something that could be very beneficial is doing a community based assessment. Where you go around and you kind of like canvas, like ask people, what are you seeing in regards to this? What are you seeing in this? What are you seeing in that? And then you kind of take that back to your local and your just the elected officials and like, look, this is what these people are saying. This is what they're saying. What can we do about this? Like, if we're going to live in this community, we need to feel the sense of safety and without the fear of retaliation for speaking up, right? So, thinking about that community based justice, expand on this and what does it look like? What does it entail? And how do we get there?
Yeah, so
Ooh, that was a really loaded question. um,
that's a big one, but again, it's something that I think is possible. There are a lot of different pieces to it. For one, we need to be able to hold police accountable. I think that so much of policing is left to individual states and jurisdictions, and there needs to be a really strong national standard that gives us a good sense of transparency, so we know um, exactly what law enforcement is doing. And then I think another part of that is making sure law enforcement is just enforcing the laws. They are not supposed to be responding to things like mental health crises or, nonviolent domestic situations. We need to be able to develop some type of system where we have people who are trained to do that type of work. Police are not trained to do, mental health interventions or counseling work. There are people who have that background who would do a lot better and keep people out of the system for nonviolent crimes. I think just having that accountability and the option to be able to offer a more aligned service. Things like substance abuse. Those people don't belong in prison. They belong in a place where they can get help. Uh, we shouldn't be locking people up just for the sake of it. And uh, people feel really strongly about that, usually one way or the other. But I think a lot of it really does just have to do with making sure people have the things that they need. A lot of people turn to substances, they turn to crime, they turn to less than ideal lifestyles because there's something missing. They can't access, housing or healthcare or food or, basic necessities. And so they turn to these other life paths to try and fill those gaps. If we were able to meet people's needs at the most basic level, we could cut a lot of crime off right at the head. And then in situations where prison might be the right fit, I think that we need to do a better job of focusing on rehabilitation. Just throwing somebody in jail and leaving them there is not going to prevent crime from happening again. We need to give people access to things like education and mental health and the tools to go out there and uh, get a job and build a life once they're released from prison. They need ongoing counseling in some cases, and that's something we should be able to offer. It's a benefit to society and it's a benefit to the individual.
Absolutely. So, whenever we think about alternatives of policing, and whenever we think about alternatives of, and more specifically in relation to like survivors, so obviously we see like a lot of survivors that do not report, and there's a lot of very obvious reasons, and I can give
Mhm.
you a very brief story, but I was sexually assaulted at the age of 17. And whenever I went to report my sexual assault to my local police department, I was told, well, you're a man. Why didn't you fight him off? Why didn't you? And he was asking like these very like debilitating questions. And my mom is sitting or is standing right next to me. And she was like, you shouldn't be asking those questions. They should be taking you to a room. You should be going and getting a rape kit done. Like
Right.
there's like all these things. But thinking about that and thinking about, we still have a rape kit backlog across the country. And thinking about that, what approaches would you take to support survivors? And, obviously, like the Jeffrey Epstein files is a huge thing, right?
Boy.
We've sat down and interviewed two of the Epstein survivors specifically, and we just saw the stuff come out with Eric Swalwell. There's a lot more coming, and just thinking about that, we don't have a Department of Justice that functions as a Department of Justice. It's a department of protection for the elite, right? So thinking about that, what would you support in regards to supporting and uplifting survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence? Because this also ties into, healthcare. It also ties into gun violence. It also ties into, ending the rape kit backlog. It also ties into closing the loopholes, like what is in New York, also known as the voluntary intoxication loophole, but also like the boyfriend loopholes, and just walking through like what you propose as far as like supporting survivors.
Yeah, well, first I just want to thank you for being willing to share your story. I know that's probably not something easy to talk about, and I'm sorry that that was your experience. I think it's not a uncommon experience, unfortunately. And one of the biggest things that we could do is just have a very consistent response to things like that. I think um, it falls between the cracks very often, and I can't pretend to understand why it's not something that's prioritized more. If I had to take a guess, I would say that um, the people who commit the crimes are protected by the people who are okay with the crimes. Um, And that's just my assumption, because nothing else makes sense to me. But just being able to have a really standardized approach to it and one that centers the needs and wants of survivors. I think survivors should always have control over what happens next. when they report, it should be their choice whether they seek medical care or not. It should be their choice whether they seek legal consequences or not. And so I think just centering survivors is one of the most important things we could do. Um, Providing prevention education. Sometimes things like this happen because we don't teach about consent. A lot of times, especially in school, the message that they get is abstinence and abstinence only. Sometimes you may get some education at home. More often than not, there's nothing coming from home. And so, just making sure that we have access to really good education so they know, we all know what healthy relationships look like. And we can teach things like bystander intervention. So if you witness sexual assault or harassment, you can step in a safe way. Um, Prevention is one of the biggest tools we have in a lot of things, but especially in sexual assault and supporting survivors. And then also there's so many pieces that go with it, but I think just the whole economic um, reality for a lot of people. There are so many survivors who stay in situations where they are unsafe, where um, they continue to be abused because they don't have another option. Financially, it's impossible for them to find, different housing or um, being able to pack up and drive away or, having family to go to. And so making sure that people have economic autonomy so they can make the decisions that are best for them. And then the whole issue of the Epstein files, I think that goes so much deeper than you or I could ever imagine. And I'm really hoping that it all comes to light. I think that it is going to take deep reckoning um, to really be able to address that properly. I still don't have the full picture of it because I can't bring myself to read a lot of what's been released, even though a lot of it has been redacted. It's just so difficult to read and imagine that there are people who would treat women and children this way or anyone this way, really. It disgusts me so much. And one of my top priorities would be making sure that not only we publicize every single thing that we have, but making sure that we hold these people accountable to the highest extent of the law.
Absolutely. And this is where like restorative justice comes in too. And there's pieces of restorative justice that I support. There's some of them that's kind of questionable about, and then like being like ideal, in today's society, right? Thinking about the current systems, restorative justice works for some while it doesn't work for others. And it just kind of like goes back and forth, right? And thinking about that, I want to say thank you again for coming on the podcast today. And I thoroughly enjoyed sitting down and talking about everything that we've talked about. Now, the important part, how can people contribute to your campaign and find out more about your platform and also uplift what you are currently doing?
Yeah, well, again, thank you for having me. It's been great having this conversation. I love being able to just talk about this. Everything is one of the most important things we can do. But you can learn more about me, about my platform and plans in Congress at my website is jakeyajohnson.com, Jakeya, Johnsson.com. We have social media. I think our handle is Jakeya_HQ on most social media. We share all different kinds of things on social media. And through the website, you'll be able to find social media. You'll be able to find ways to donate, to volunteer. We've been out knocking doors every week for a few months now. We'll continue through the election, which is on June 23rd, and early voting will be June 11th through 18th. So, Maryland is one of those states that has a closed primary. I know there are a ton of people in the state who are independents because they've kind of lost faith in both major political parties. And so, I know it can be annoying, but just being willing to switch your registration just for the primary so you can participate. And then, you can go right back to being independent after we get through June. But yeah, we've gotten a chance to talk to so many really great people and form lots of great relationships across the state. I look forward to meeting more people. We've got a great volunteer teams that come and join us. Um, you know, we have lots of fun and we do important work too. And so I'd love to be able to bring more people into that.
Absolutely. And in the description, we will add your donation link as well as your social media and as well as your website, just so that people that are curious, they can find out more about you. Because honestly, what you do in Congress does not only just impact your district, it impacts the entire country. And I think a lot of politicians forget about that. Like, whatever you decide to do, it is going to impact millions and millions and millions of people, right?
That's
Not
right.
just those that are in your district, but like I said, all across the country. So again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I look forward to continue watching your campaign. Obviously from afar because I'm based in Kansas. I would absolutely be there. I hate door knocking, but you would be one of those candidates that I would be willing to push that to the side and do. But I know that there's also the virtual opportunities if you have them to do the
Yeah.
phone banking. So, but yeah, other than that, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I greatly appreciate you and good luck in your primary. I'm so excited. It feels like it's so far away, but in reality, it's literally just within like what, a couple weeks now.
Yeah, we're
So,
we're just about 2 months away. It feels
yeah.
both far away and right around the corner at the same time.
But I know with the true grassroots power, you will get through to that point and beyond. I feel it with every ounce of my being. And again, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.